what exactly is blasphemy? It's a perceived violation of an idea or a dogma, which is held so sacred that the violation is seen to be justifying retribution.
In the West, which we're used to the idea of criticizing every religion if we believe we want to, we take it as free speech. But for some extremists, it's blasphemy and it's a death sentence.
The main cancer in our Canadian fabric is politically correctness. That's where the new blasphemy law exists.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Libby Znaimer.
Welcome to the Zoomer. Thank you for joining us. If you think blasphemy is an outdated concept, you'd be mistaken. Blasphemy laws are still on the books in about a quarter of the world's countries with devastating results. And not all blasphemy relates to conventional religion. Before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
If you thought blasphemy laws, meaning speaking insultingly about a particular religion or God, were a thing of the past, think again. 69 of the world's 195 countries have laws banning blasphemy, 6 of which carry a death penalty. Until recently, Canada has its own relic still on the books. In 2018, Canada repealed a 125-year-old law prohibiting blasphemous libel, though it had been 90 years since the last person was convicted under it. Another 25 countries outlaw apostasy, which means to renounce a religion, and in nearly half of them, it's a capital offense. Blasphemy and apostasy laws are most common in the Middle East and North Africa. However, such laws exist across continents, including Europe and the Americas.
Having blasphemy laws on the books is just one part of the equation. The question is, what makes some places fertile grounds for the drive to enforce them and popular support for this type of action? Let's go to our panel. Hi, Majid.
It's a pleasure talking to you. How are you?
I'm fine. You've dealt with blasphemy laws. You yourself were the victim of a death sentence for changing your religion.
Absolutely, and this is just an example. I was one of the lucky ones that I was able to survive and to escape to Israel, and from Israel through United Nations to Canada to start a new life and to help others that used to be in the same position like myself. But in reality, in many countries such as Pakistan, where they have a blasphemy law, 295C and 295B, where you can see that it's still punishable by the death and or even life in prison. This is something that's happening in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Pakistan, in many of the Arab Muslim countries, in many of the Muslim countries in general. But as you indicated in the beginning, there is also not just related to religion. This can be related to social movement, what we call it politically correctness. So today in our Canadian society, in our Western society, the main cancer in our Canadian fabric is politically correctness. That's where the new blasphemy law exists.
Shantasir, you're a Pakistani rights activist. What's your view of the way blasphemy laws are enforced in Pakistan?
Well, basically, blasphemy laws have similar characteristics wherever they are, not just in Pakistan, but around the world. So what exactly is a blasphemy law? Or what exactly is blasphemy? It's a perceived violation of an idea or a dogma, which is held so sacred that the violation is seen to be justifying retribution. Now, wherever you have ideas in a society that cannot be questioned, they are held so sacred that you give them the rights resembling human rights, the right not to be aggressed, the right not to be the right not to be violated, the right to live in dignity, which in a civilized society you would want human beings to have such rights. But where such rights are appropriated by an idea or a dogma, it creates a blasphemy law. Obviously, sometimes it's a codified blasphemy law. So that is essentially what a blasphemy law is. But it's not just the blasphemy law itself, which is insidious, because The existence of a blasphemy law also creates the requirement of a moral police force, a self-appointed moral police force to execute the punishments involved.
What's your view of this, Martin?
I believe that blasphemy is still alive and kicking throughout the world, and including Europe. And if you want the most obvious case of that is what happened in France. It's happened in Austria. It's a copycat syndrome, and it's not a copycat syndrome without a reason. It's because it's touching on the essence, on the right of people to criticize a religion or not to criticize a religion. In the West, which we're used to the idea of criticizing every religion if we believe we want to, we take it as free speech, but for some extremists, it's blasphemy and it's a death sentence. And we see that is still happening very strongly to this day.
Well, yeah, it seems to be more than just a few extremists, because when the call is put out, we see masses of people protesting whatever the alleged blasphemy was. Who wants to take that?
What's happened in France, what's happened in Vienna after that, we need to say it as it is. It was a terrorist attack. The debate of freedom of expression should not even be what our prime minister indicated, that there is a limit for the freedom of expression. This is absolutely nonsense. We are free to express our feeling, our thoughts, our ideas, and nothing can stop us, or nothing should be scaring us.
Sean, what makes some places sort of fertile grounds for this? What would make people, get up from their regular lives, what they're doing, what they do every day, to try and punish somebody for this?
The existence of a blasphemy law creates a job opening. It is a call for people to come and enforce this law. Now, you have codified blasphemy laws, but you also have uncodified blasphemy laws, which is calling when a proclamation of blasphemy or an accusation of blasphemy occurs, it is a very provocative emotion to the people of that belief system. It is a call to action. There's nothing benign about an accusation of blasphemy. It is a call generally for vigilante action. Because it comes on the back of a catastrophe or a moral panic. It's the creation of a moral panic saying that something has happened, something terrible has happened. Religion has been harmed, for example. And when you say religion has been harmed, then without quite saying it in so many words, it's also a call for the believers to come and rescue religion.
You're talking about people who believe they're defending the religion, but I've seen explanations that say that basically in places, say like Pakistan or India, it's just used as an excuse to settle scores, to take over people's property or whatnot. What about that aspect of it?
See, obviously, when you come across an unstoppable force, when you come across an accusation that does not allow the accused so much as the opportunity to present a defense, which will destroy the accused on the spot with something that powerful, obviously bad actors arise, cynical actors arrive. When there are disputes to be settled in marketplaces, in universities, as has happened in Pakistan, it's an invitation. Whenever you harbor ill feelings to someone, the Damocles sword is hanging there, ready to be used by any bad actor. So you level an accusation of blasphemy.
We have the famous case of Asya Bibi, a Christian woman who apparently is now in Canada after being on death row for blasphemy. And she came from a poor segment of society. Is there, Martin, a socio-economic aspect to this or anything like that?
Well, in the case of Asya Bibi, you have a long-standing prejudice against Christians in Pakistan. Christians have been persecuted for ages in Pakistan because they're considered blasphemers by the fact that they don't accept the Prophet Muhammad. And Asya Bibi was working in fields, and she had arguments with the other workers in the field who were Muslim. She's Christian. And her massive charge that led to a death sentence was that she took a cup of water from a well that Christians could not use because they would defile the purity of that well if they were to drink it. But It's quite possible she drank from that many times, and other Christians drank from it many times. But there was a score to settle here, and so it was used against her. So for drinking water from a Christian well, she was branded as a blasphemer. She sat 9 years on death row. Sean's father was assassinated by his guard because he tried to get her out of prison. When she did finally get out of prison and was smuggled to Canada, her own lawyers had to flee the country because they were threatened with death. And there were riots all across Pakistan. So you can see the depths and the strength of these laws and the support for it. There are millions and millions of people in Pakistan who support these laws.
Empirical evidence certainly supports that, because in Pakistan, over 90% of those accused of blasphemy are the poorest of the poor. We have sweepers, farmhands, mechanics, laborers, the infirm. It is a law that targets the weakest of the weak in the society. And I would say for that reason alone, just for that, if you know nothing else about the blasphemy law, for that reason alone, it is an unfair and an unjust law, and therefore an illegitimate law.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the recent deadly blasphemy attacks in France. Stay tuned.
Europe and the West have shown a sort of a combination of cowardice and white guilt towards these monsters. And because most of the people dying at the hands of Islamist terrorists are Muslims.
Blasphemy and freedom of speech are once again key issues in France after the recent attacks that followed the publication, actually the republication, of the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Teacher Samuel Paty was beheaded after showing his students the controversial cartoons. French President Emmanuel Macron vowed to crack down on radical Islam. Days later, after calls from some Muslim nations for boycotts against France, 3 people in that country were brutally murdered at the Notre Dame Basilica. Let us start with Wes Tyrrell. You're a cartoonist. In France, your occupation is very dangerous.
France has a very, very sophisticated cartoon culture that really is clearly not understood by a lot of people around the world, and I'll include Canada in that regard. That magazine, the Charlie Hebdo magazine, and magazines like that are extremely poignant and powerful satirical weeklies or monthlies that are meant to be inflammatory, but for a specific audience. This is not like it's in your daily Toronto Star or the New York Times or something like that. And the call goes out, whether it's because we live in the digital age, it goes out across the internet. My goodness, this horrible cartoon has appeared. We must do something about it. And I'm always very deeply disappointed that the powers that be encourage young people to commit violence as a result.
Well, it's interesting because obviously the first time they were published, we had the horrible massacre, the Charlie Hebdo massacre. They were republished ahead of a legal proceeding. And then this teacher, he introduced the cartoons to a class on this very subject, on freedom of expression. But in addition to that, he pre-warned, he told the Muslim students that they might be offended by this. He gave them the opportunity not to attend the class. In terms of accommodation, it's hard to see what could have been done in order to mitigate the offense in addition to what he already did.
Something that I find, and this is a cross-cultural scenario, and it goes back to us when we were in the schoolyard, where we thought we could score points with our buddies by doing the more provocative or the more outlandish scenario, hitting somebody, attacking somebody, insulting somebody, doing whatever. And it seems to me that often when these episodes occur, somebody is provoking young people to say, hey, you are going to be looked at heroically if you do this, terrible act of violence. And from a cartoonist perspective, it should never, ever occur. We reserve the right to offend people. If somebody wants to offend me, go right ahead. You should be able to, in a modern society, be able to take it to some degree and equally protest. Say, this is too much, we don't appreciate this, and that's fine. You just don't end up executing a teacher outside of his school.
Let's bring in Tariq Fatah. Hi, Tariq.
Hello.
Tariq, what's your view of this? I mean, and again, here is an example of a horrific crime, and it didn't happen in Pakistan, a place that has strict blasphemy laws. It happened in France.
Well, it happens in Pakistan all the time, except that we are unworthy of being reported on. We've just had 50 people gathered into a football field in Mozambique with their heads chopped off. It didn't even make the front page news. So what has happened is that Europe and the West have shown a sort of a combination of cowardice and white guilt towards these monsters. And because most of the people dying at the hands of Islamist terrorists are Muslims.
Let's just bring in Martin here. I mean, obviously, a terrible incident like this really underscores the tension between freedom of speech and offending people. Where do you think that comes down in France in the light of these attacks?
You have to remember that France has a very long history of separation of church and state, of secularism, and secularism especially in the classroom. And I believe that in France, there's a double rebound against efforts to punish people for alleged blasphemies. But they're going to have their hands full, and so will the rest of Europe, because over the years, we don't hear the word ISIS anymore, but they're still there, and they've shown an amazingly effective use of social media in order to convert people to very extreme causes. In the attack in Vienna, they apparently had influence on the attacker there as well. And then compound that with years and years of Wahhabism, the export of extreme Islam from Saudi Arabia to Europe to basically imbue a very strong anti-Western form of Islam into all sorts of mosques across Europe with money and schools, etc. The effects, the fruits of all this is what we see now in these violent attacks against anybody who in any way, shape, form criticizes Islam.
Okay. When we come back, we'll hear the story of a family in hiding here in Canada because of their religion.
If you let us go back to Nigeria, and then the next thing you hear is how we are being mutilated and killed, how would that play on your conscience?
Welcome back. We've been discussing the fundamental clash between blasphemy and freedom of speech. Apostasy is the other side of the coin. It means renouncing your religion can be deadly. Our videographer Darren Maharaj shares the story of the Ogunkoya family.
Please, you're like denying us stay here is like a death sentence. You are sentencing us to death.
That's Morafat Ogunkoya. The Nigerian mother of 3 has been in hiding for the past year in Canada after receiving a deportation order. The Ogunkoyas originally fled Nigeria after receiving death threats for converting from Islam to Christianity and have been fighting to stay here in Canada for the past 3 years.
Let my people go! Let
my people go! Unfortunately, our government believes that they can return safely to a Christian majority area of the country, but the family says returning home would mean certain death.
I want to say this to the people in position to help us. If you let us go back to Nigeria, and then the next thing you hear is a video clip of how we are being mutilated and killed, how would that play on your conscience?
The Reverend Majid El-Shafi, founder of the human rights organization One Free World International, has been working hard to help keep the Ogunkoyas here in Canada and says there is no place in Nigeria where they can be safe since Morafat's father, who is affiliated with Boko Haram, declared a fatwa.
The boy can face the death penalty. The 2 girls can be forced to convert back again to Islam or can be raped or anything bad can happen to them. When the judge here in Canada, the immigration judge said, well, you can return back again to your home country, stay in the Christian section. There is no Christian section. It's a country that the Muslims control, the government, the army, the policing, the Muslim extremist groups. Nobody will save them. If they want to hunt them down, they will hunt them down. Doesn't matter where you are in Nigeria.
Before they were forced into hiding, the Ogunkoyas had made a home in Welland, Ontario, where they were embraced by the local community and the kids were enrolled in school, working hard, even winning awards, only to have it all taken away.
I just beg Canadians to please help my family, to help me. I want to be able to graduate with my peers. I want to be able to finish high school like every other kid.
Please, people of Canada, let us stay in Canada because I really miss my friends.
Now, unfortunately, the Ogunkoyas have once again received bad news. Their latest attempt to stay in the country has failed. Their agency application has been denied. I've been told their next step will be to pursue a judicial review in the Federal Court of Canada. If you'd like to learn more about their story and find out how you can help, visit ofwi.org. In Toronto, I'm Darren Maharaj for theZoomer, leaving you with a final message from 15-year-old Hebzibah.
I just hope that the people of Canada would help me and my family because I really don't want to die.
Well, Sonia Wiranga, along with Majid, you've worked closely with this family for many years. Where do things with their fight stand now?
The family is very devastated and concerned. They're living in fear.
They're already facing deportation, and there is a deportation order against them. The family is in hiding right now because simply, if they surrender to the Canadian police and been deported, they will be immediately killed upon their arrival to Nigeria. That's what we believe.
Does it complicate the ask, their bid to stay, the fact that they are breaking the deportation order, which I guess is breaking the law?
Absolutely, but what another option? Put yourself in her place, a single mom with 3 kids. You break the law here in Canada or you go to Nigeria to be killed and tortured. You choose.
Sonia, what's your view of that?
I totally agree. I've had many conversations with the family and they know that it's a death sentence if they return. So I feel like since I have that information, I'll do anything I can to protect them.
Okay, so is the plan to have them in hiding indefinitely?
Well, we're hoping that through social media and through politicians listening to the story that we can figure this out and have good results in the near future. Okay. All we need is one signature.
Well, keep us updated, and we wish you all the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
When we come back, some call it the unwritten secular version of blasphemy laws. Is it about policing hate speech or blocking free speech? We'll discuss cancel culture coming up.
I take some comfort that there are some restrictions on what is claimed to be free speech. You just can't say anything that's hurtful and harmful.
The Imam Khomeini, the leader of Iran, is able to say whatever he wants. Iran is extremely homophobic. Ahmadinejad in the old days used to say, that, oh, we don't have any gay people in Iran. It's about who says it, not what is said. So if imams post sometimes quite anti-Semitic things on Twitter, nobody even notices them until, and even if they're reported, it's sometimes not taken down. But if a Westerner criticizes Jessica Yaniv, they could see their Twitter account disappear in 20 minutes.
I'm kind of happy that Twitter has banned people like Meghan Murphy. I take some comfort that there are some restrictions on what is claimed to be free speech. You just can't say anything that's hurtful and harmful. The Supreme Court has been very clear on what hate speech is. While I don't think people like Megan Murphy have reached that threshold yet. I think unrestricted, they are going down that path.
Welcome back. That was a clip from Martin Himmel's documentary, Blasphemy, which premiered here on Vision TV. Now, having popular opinions on social media can bring instant gratification and thousands of likes, but offending any organized group often comes with swift condemnation and ostracism. It's been dubbed cancel culture, and Megan Murphy, you experienced this phenomenon firsthand. Thanks for being with us, Megan.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us your story. What happened to you? What did you have the temerity to say, and what happened afterwards?
I mean, essentially, I was canceled for speaking critically about what I call gender identity ideology, and trans activism. So that would be the idea that a person can change sex, the idea that somebody can be born in the wrong body, the idea that if a man says he's a woman, he's literally a woman and literally female. I mean, at the end of the day, I was banned from Twitter for referring to a male, Jonathan/Jessica Yaniv, as he. And he is male. He, at the time, was using both male and female pronouns on various platforms. He was using his male name still on various platforms. But, and yeah, I mean, essentially, it was about the heresy of challenging this ideology, which I consider actually to be a faith-based ideology.
Mm-hmm. What were the other consequences for you?
I've been subjected to violent threats, to rape threats, to death threats. I've been smeared and vilified, not just online. You know, I think people think of social media as not particularly important. Social media is important. We're all very dependent on these social media platforms nowadays for our access to news, to information, to engage in the public conversation. This is where, you know, journalists share their work. This is where information is passed among people. And this is where we go to find out what's going on in the world. So it really isn't trivial at all. But beyond that, you know, in the Canadian media, in American media as well, I was libeled in mainstream papers, you know, mainstream online publications. And
libeled
there
how?
were very, pardon?
Libeled how?
I was accused of being hateful, of bigoted, of being transphobic, of, you know, spreading hateful ideas about trans-identified people, and of, you know, being exclusionary, being opposed to LGBT, etc. groups and activism. So, and I mean, you know, to be fair, I am opposed to some of that activism and some of those ideas. But I think that we should be able to have a conversation about it. I think we should be able to have a debate about it. I think that, you know, there's nothing that I've said that could possibly be evidence to be hateful or bigoted. And in fact, I think that it's the people who are threatening me, who are smearing me, who are working to silence me, who are bigoted. You know, these are the people, in fact, who are unwilling to understand, empathize with, engage with ideas that don't fit in within the very narrow bounds of their own opinions and faiths and ideas and religions. I say religion because I see this ideology, this gender identity ideology, as being completely faith-based and anti-science. It's not rooted in any science. It's just about what people believe. And because some people believe this, we're all supposed to believe it as well.
Well, there are certain criteria that scientists have laid out for figuring out if somebody should get a sex change. I mean, we can debate that, but you know, people say all kinds of science or anti-science thing, and they aren't canceled necessarily for it. Did this affect your ability to make a living?
Absolutely. I mean, it's affected my ability to work, period. I'm an independent writer, media producer, journalist, and I don't work for any other institution. I'm purely dependent on myself and my followers and my ability to get my work and content out into the world. So if I'm not able to be on Twitter, I'm not able to participate in that conversation. I'm not able to, defend myself against smears. People can say whatever they want about me online, and I can't respond, I can't clarify. But also I can't connect to sources. I can't connect to other writers, other journalists, to interviewees. I can't reach people. I can't engage with people. I've really been shut out of the public conversation.
Okay, Megan, thank you very much for sharing your story. When we come back, Canada's response to the attacks in France. Should our leaders be doing more? That's next.
And what was right is to stand beside the French people, is to stand beside the freedom of expression, to understand that this was a violent act and to condemn it right away.
Freedom of expression is not unlimited. For example, it's not allowed to cry fire in a packed cinema.
Well, that was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, or actually his translator, and that was his first reaction to the beheading of Samuel Paty, the French teacher murdered by a Muslim extremist, because he showed those cartoons of Mohammed in a class on free expression. Now, Trudeau waited more than a week after it happened before expressing solidarity with France, but he hedged his condemnation, as you heard, by emphasizing that free speech has limits. Now, that drew backlash in France and in Quebec, and from callers into Zoomer Radio's Fight Back.
The Muslims are a strong voting bloc for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and he doesn't want to offend them in any way, and that is why he is staying neutral on this terrible evil that has been done.
I think the Prime Minister needs a spine. He did not speak out strong enough for free speech. You know, this is a country where we're supposed to be able to speak what we want and what we think, whether other people agree with us or not. If they don't like our values and the way we live, they should not be here.
He talked about them being heinous acts of terrorism. He says they were heinous criminal acts unjustifiable by any circumstance and an affront to all of our values. Well, I think Trudeau did that.
Trudeau again waited a week after the next instance of Muslim extremist terror, where 3 people were killed in that deadly knife assault in the church in Nice, before commenting. This time, he called French President Emmanuel Macron and offered a more fulsome defense of free speech. But is that enough? Let's start with Sean. Or is our Prime Minister somehow enabling cancel culture?
Well, I just want to remind Mr. Trudeau that freedom of expression is limited in a civilized society. It is limited by the rejection of ideas in a free marketplace of ideas. It can be limited by ridicule, by derision, by lack of economic incentive for peddling bad ideas, by protest, by a social penalty for the author of bad ideas.
Majid, what do you think of the Prime Minister's various responses?
I believe that the Prime Minister is not just need a spine, he needs also a brain. If he donated his brain to science, science will return it back. The story here is, as Sean said, he's giving space to the extremists, he's giving them an excuse. Once again, is the politically correctness that we're talking about it. And what's known about him and what's known about the Liberal, that they will do what is popular, not what is right. And what was right is to stand beside the French people, is to stand beside the freedom of expression, to understand that this was a violent act and to condemn it right away. But he didn't do that, and that's the problem that we have here in Canada. And I hope that one day he doesn't wake up when it's too late for our society, when it's too late for Canada, And we see heinous crimes like this happening often in Canada.
Wes, what do you think of those responses, given that you work in a field that's
I'm not
dangerous?
as hostile towards Trudeau as some of the other people, but I definitely feel that the response was tepid. And I'd love to see, not just from our country, but leaders from virtually every country across the globe collectively go hand in hand in the way that they did when the Charlie Hebdo massacre occurred. Leaders from around the globe descended upon on France to show solidarity. And I don't think that that's too much to ask, regardless of where it's coming from, whether it's a secular or a religious outrage that occurs. You know, leaders should be saying that no one deserves to die for their opinions in these matters. It's just ridiculous.
Megan Murphy, when you look at this response and sort of bring it back to your own experience, what do you think?
I mean, I thought Trudeau's response was pathetic. And in general, I think that, you know, liberal or progressive Canadians, whatever you want to call them, I'm sure that Trudeau thinks of himself as a very progressive man, are really bad on the free speech issue. We completely take it for granted. And if we lose free speech, we're in really big trouble. And I think people fail to realize that. I think that a lot of progressive people think that they can condemn the speech of others because they don't like that speech. They disagree with that speech. They think that speech is wrong. And they think that that won't come back and hurt them in the end, that their free speech will be protected. But that's not how free speech works. We need to protect everyone's free speech. And when we're talking about people being murdered, a man was beheaded for trying to have a conversation about free speech and free expression. The correct response is not, well, you know, we can't offend people. We have to be careful about hurting people's feelings. I mean, it's really kind of reprehensible to respond in that way. Trudeau should have absolutely stood up for free speech and free expression.
Okay, well, he ultimately, eventually did. Tariq, how do you see this?
No matter what Justin Trudeau says or does, he still has 30 to 35% of Canadians supporting him. There is no outrage in ordinary Canadians. So I think it's in the intellectual class to talk about freedom of speech or anything. But in the end, if you're being voted again and again, this is the same man who introduced M103. In Canada, there's a law where I can be charged for Islamophobia. It's been done by a group that is in that dominates Parliament and functions over there. Anytime there's an election, people vote for the Liberal Party and bring him back to power. I have become cynical of this notion that Canadians believe in freedom of speech. I don't think so, because otherwise this man would not be Prime Minister.
Okay. When we come back, we'll have final thoughts from our panelists. Welcome back. Our panelists will leave you with some final thoughts, starting with Sean.
Hi. I just want to say that the cancel culture has all the characteristics of a blasphemy law, an undefined crime, absolute punishment, no room for forgiveness, no room for nuance, and a self-appointed police force. It is against the values of a civilized society and therefore must be worked against.
Martin.
Fighting blasphemy is fighting for the right to think, the right to doubt, the right to challenge, the right to have open ideas. And in our society, whether it's in the Middle East and it's fighting religious dogma, you're prevented from thinking. Or if it's in Canada or in the West, if you disagree with progressive ideas and you're not allowed to talk, that's also limiting the right to think. And it's the advocation of thinking, it's the right to think that's most important.
Wes.
I think an important reminder for everyone is that the issue with free speech on a negative side doesn't lie strictly with the left or with the right. It's problematic across the spectrum, as we've seen in the United States. And certainly lots of my colleagues who draw pictures down there have lost their jobs as a result of speaking their mind out about the now former president.
Megan?
Proponents of cancel culture often say, you know, freedom of speech doesn't come without consequences, or it doesn't mean freedom from consequences. And I think that functions as sort of a veiled threat. But I also think that, you know, what we really need to understand in this culture is that to have good ideas and to develop good policy, to develop good legislation and good politics, we need to debate and we need to have conversations. And by silencing and threatening and sometimes even murdering people who say things we don't like or who challenge our beliefs, I don't think that's the best way to come to, you know, good ideas, good policy, good legislation. If we want, you know, robust society, a robust democracy, we need to support free speech. And I'm disappointed that progressives don't.
Tarek.
Well, I would suggest that we have a Charlie Hebdo exhibition in Toronto, anywhere in Canada, and let's see what happens over here. Because the real test is acting out what we preach. If people are willing, I'll be there and I'll stand there as a Muslim to defend the right of Charlie Hebdo to exhibit what they want. If I disagree, I can have my own other exhibition of cartoons of people who kill people for Charlie Hebdo. Those cartoons, I can tell you, will be much better than the Charlie Hebdo ones. But if we can't act, there's too much talking going on by my standards.
And last but not least, Majid.
We have to protect our Canadian society. We have to speak freely. And doesn't matter what's the price, we will always stand with the people of Paris, of France. We will always stand with the freedom of expression. And we will always be there for other nations that's suffering from the lack of freedom of expression.
So, is cancel culture the modern day successor to blasphemy laws, and where is the fine line between free speech and hate speech? We hope we've given you a lot to think about. Thank you to our guests and to our audience at home. We'll see you soon.